Hi everyone, welcome to the latest midweek message from St. John's Church here in Weymouth. Wherever you're joining us from, we're really glad that you're able to do so and hope you're doing okay. We continue then to look at 1 and 2 Peter, those letters written by Peter the Apostle, the disciple of Jesus, written to the early church, not written to a group of people in one place, but to a group of people spread out over many places, a little bit like we are at the moment. We get to chapter 2, and chapter 2, you just need to read it in your own time. It's so full of brilliant images for us of what it means to follow Jesus, of who we are, of who Jesus is. So much so that I was spoilt for choice, really, is to think about which part of it to briefly talk about today. So have a good look, see what Peter has to say in chapter 2. But my eyes were drawn to a word that's repeated twice, and so I thought it's worth looking at. And the word is priesthood. Now, I was perhaps particularly thinking about this word this weekend because it's 6 years to the weekend just gone that I was ordained a priest. And it's also the weekend where many people up and down the country were due to be ordained priest. And of course, that's been postponed and put back. And that'll be a strange feeling for people who have had their sights set on this weekend for some time, that their ordination to the priesthood in the Church of England and in other denominations as well will have to wait. But Peter talks not about individuals as priests, but as the people of God as priests. And in verse 2, he says we are a holy priesthood. And then in verse 9, he says we are a royal priesthood. Last week, we said that the word holy probably has a bit of a bad press and fairly negative connotations around it. Well, the word priest is probably even worse. It's a difficult word for us to work with and maybe to reclaim. Think for a moment of your experience of priests in the media, priests on TV. Maybe you're a fan of Father Ted. Maybe you've enjoyed The Vicar of Dibley over the years, both great programs that I have no problem with and enjoy. Maybe you've seen Rev, maybe more recently you've seen Broken, a more serious account of the life of a priest. Or maybe you've seen priests playing really sinister, dark, spooky roles in certain films. But it seems that a priest, when depicted in the media, is either a kind of bumbling, light-hearted, fairly ineffective but nice person, or someone a bit darker and a bit more sinister. And I suggest that today, because of things that have been in the news over recent years, the word priest has some pretty negative connotations to it. Yet, Peter calls us priests. Now, I'm ordained a priest. It's part of the role that I play. It's part of who I am. And there's a distinctive role as a priest in the church. A priest is understood as someone who stands in the gap and enables and equips and encourages mediation. And so in the Old Testament, it was often the priests who were to mediate on behalf of the people and before God and to bring sacrifices and atonement and all those kind of things. And actually, as the priest here in this church, in this part of Weymouth, I have a distinctive role, which is to enable you as God's people, to encourage you, to equip you, to enable you to be close to God. You don't need me necessarily to do it. You can do it all by yourself. But my role is particularly around encouraging you, enabling you to be close to God, to stay close to Jesus. And it's an absolute joy, absolute privilege to have that role. I love it, and I don't take it for granted at all. But that's not the kind of priesthood that Peter's talking about, because he's not just addressing leaders, he's addressing the whole people of God. And he says we are a holy priesthood and a royal priesthood. Jesus was the great high priest. He is the great high priest, the greatest of all the great high priests. He supremely mediated between God the Father and humanity in its brokenness. He supremely reconciled the two. And so our understanding of priesthood has to primarily come from our understanding of Jesus' ministry. And so I'm there to help you to be close to God. But we, as God's people, also have a priestly role. And I think it's to do with standing with the world and taking the world's hand, the people around us, and encouraging the world to hold the hand of God. That's our priestly vocation as God's people. To represent God here, not in his absence, because by his Spirit he is here, but to be his people, to stand literally in this place, in this church, but all around the community, in the way we live our lives, and encourage and enable and equip those who don't know Jesus to be reconciled to God and to know him. And that's a great privilege for us as God's people. I had a taste of this when I was a youth worker many years ago, both here in this parish and in other places as well. And I often thought my job was a little bit priest-like, although I wouldn't have used that word at the time. I wasn't ordained. But actually, I was kind of standing in a gap between the young people, the teenagers, and the adult church. And I spent a fair bit of time trying to encourage the adult church to understand the young people, and a fair bit of time trying to encourage the young people to understand the adult church. Almost two different worlds, and I needed to be part of both, and I needed to love both. And that was a good fun part of that job. Often it was apologizing on behalf of one group to the other and trying to encourage understanding and love. It's what Jesus does. He stands in the gap so that we can be close to God. It's what the cross does. It bridges that gap. Now, we can't bridge the gap in the way that Jesus has done. Only he can do that. Only he can save. Only he can reconcile broken people to a loving God. But we have a priestly role to get in the mix, to get in the midst, and to encourage people to take their hands and place their hands in the hand of God. So feel the weight of that responsibility just for a moment. That Peter says, that's you. You're a priest. You're all priests, because that's the role you've got. Encouraging reconciliation with God. It's a privilege, and it's a joy, and it can be hard work, but we're called to that ministry together. I've been reading a little bit around it, a book called The Widening Circle by Bishop Graham Tomlin, and he says this of those who are chosen. He says, election is never for privilege, but always for blessing. Those who are chosen are selected to be the divine means of bringing blessing to the whole of which they are part. And he's not talking just about individuals who wear dog collars and hang around churches. He's talking about the priesthood of all believers. Peter's made it very clear in chapter 1 that we are chosen. He said it over and over again, and it's been mentioned in these midweek messages too. We are chosen, and it's not for our own status and privilege. It's for the blessing of the world. So let's continue to love the world and encourage those we know to hold on to the hand of God. Maybe that's people who already know him and need to know him more. Maybe it's people who have wandered away from him. Maybe it's people who have never met him. But that's our vocation. That's what we do. That's what it is to be the people of God. We encourage people to be near to God through what Jesus has done for them. So this week, pray for those people you're praying for. Keep sharing your faith with those people you're sharing your faith with, loving those people that you are loving. Maybe without even using the term priesthood, to know that you're undertaking that ministry amongst people. It's a job I want to do well. It's a job I'm sure we all want to do well. So we'll continue next week. We'll look at the second half of chapter 2, continuing to learn from God's word. We look forward to that. But between now and then, have a great week, and we'll speak again very soon. God bless.